Story 1. I woke up one morning and found that, in my sleep, I had taken my shirt off. I looked everywhere for the shirt, especially since it was my favorite, but I never found it. I lived alone at the time, and there was no way to open any of the windows, so it is still a mystery to me where it went. Story 2. In the pre-global positioning system phone tracking era, how did my mother always manage to know where I was? She tracked me down and found me in many unexpected places I did not think she would be able to find. Story 3. I had a hamburger wallet. I lost my hamburger wallet. Within the year I moved. After the next year I purchased a new car. 2 years passed, and I changed both my address and car. I walked out to find it sitting in the passenger seat. Someone had slid it through the cracked window, I am guessing. Bizarre. I still don't know who found it, had it, and finally brought it back. The address on the ID inside was miles away. Story 4. The true story of my grandfather's life. He had a large knife puncture scar on his cheek, which he said he got jumping over a log with a knife in his mouth as a little boy. Over the years, I learned he had 12 siblings. He got into such a fight with one brother that the brother left town and did not tell his wife and children about his family for 50 years. My grandfather rode trains as a tramp, worked at government camp, and was a prominent businessman who was disliked by much of his community until he sold everything and retired. To me, he was like a big, friendly, fun bear of a man, but I think he was a frightening man who probably had many secrets he never shared. When he died, my father and I returned to his hometown, and hundreds of family members showed up. We were both stunned because my father had been told his dad had no siblings and was the last of the family line, and I grew up hearing the same. Story 5, kind of unusual, but I often find myself looking at the time at exactly 9:41 a.m. This happens at least 3 to 4 times a week. Story 6. I had a childhood friend who vanished more than 40 years ago. He, his sister, and his mother just packed up and left with no word of where they were going. He had been hit by a car and spent some time in the hospital before they left. I found out he was either enrolled in school or admitted to the hospital under an alias. Both possibilities seem likely. A few days after they left, someone claiming to be from the sheriff's department stopped by asking about them. Neither my mother nor I had any information, so we could not tell this person anything. My mother became suspicious after this person left and called the sheriff's department. They had never heard of this person nor sent anyone. I have tried for over 40 years to find my childhood friend to no avail. I hope he and his family are doing well wherever they are. Story 7. Last night, I thought my dog was dead. He is only 4 years old but had a very bad panic attack due to fireworks. He finally passed out, and when I got up a couple of hours later, he was not moving, and I could not feel him breathing. I started chest compressions, but still nothing. I stood there, sad and contemplating what to do next. I did not want to give up, so I kept shaking his limp body. After more chest compressions, he woke up as if nothing had happened. Deep sleep? Lord, I hope so. Story 8. I found a spoon in my silverware drawer one day. It is not part of my set, and I had never seen it before. Story 9. Oh, I got one. When I first got into emergency medical services, my parents gave me some stethoscopes with my name engraved on the bell. I lost them about 6 months into working. A few months later, I responded to a cardiac arrest on a patient I had never met before. I walked in and started assessing the patient, putting my emergency medical services and fire team to work while I looked for medications and history in her bathroom, as most people keep their medications there. Right next to the sink were my stethoscopes with my name on them. I never got the patient back. She was very old. It was a strange experience because she lived miles away from where I had lost the stethoscopes initially. I still have them today. Story 10. I once found a very small hex nut, like for a screw. I cannot emphasize how tiny it was. I found it on top of my metal cigarette box after I took one out and went to the patio to smoke it. When I came back, it was just sitting there. I lived alone and was not missing any screws on anything. I did not know what such a tiny one could be used for. I had literally just closed the box, and there was no hex nut when I left it. I kept the nut in an airtight container where I keep cannabis. It was in a small plastic bag. Then one day the bag was just empty, still closed, but empty. I still lived alone. Story 11. There was a guy who was part of my friend group in high school who just disappeared. I don't mean he was a missing person. I mean he apparently never existed. I've asked multiple people over the years about him, and no one knows who I'm talking about. He was at my 18th birthday party. I know he existed. I finally found someone who actually remembered him. He said he was his neighbor growing up and their fathers were friends. I told several people that I found someone else who remembered him, and when I asked that person again for confirmation, he was genuinely confused and had no idea what I was talking about. I know you existed, Trevor. I just don't know why no one else does. Story 12. Once, I went to dinner with my 1-year-old daughter, just the two of us because I was craving sushi. It was at a self-serve sushi place. I was putting my daughter into a high chair and caught eyes with an older man sitting in the booth next to us. I smiled. He was alone too. Not at all creepy, just a regular old guy. Suddenly, I had a very strong feeling that he was going to pay for my meal. I just knew it. This had never happened to me before. No one had ever paid for my meal for no reason. I had no reason to randomly think this, but somehow it popped into my head, and I knew it would happen. About 15 minutes later, while my daughter and I were eating, the waitress came up and said the gentleman sitting near me had paid for my meal and left. I know this could just be a coincidence. I'm not really a believer in psychics or things like that, but it was so strange that I so strongly knew this would happen. It was such a clear vision and feeling, and then it did happen. Felt very surreal. How did that happen? Did our eye contact or body language communicate something? It almost felt like we had the same idea pop into our heads at the exact same time, like he decided to do it when I felt he was going to, if that makes sense. Story 13. At a previous job, I had a name tag. I used to put it on my windowsill next to my bed every day when I got home. One day, it disappeared completely. I tore my whole house apart looking for it and never found it. After that, I left that job and moved into an apartment by myself. 6 months after moving in, I came home from work and the name tag was sitting on my dining room table, looking pristine. Story 14. One time my ex and I were at a party. We were sitting with a guy who was doing a little casual entertaining with a deck of cards. Just the three of us sitting and talking. He had her pick a card and sign her name on it with a marker. A couple of moments later, that card was in her shoe. There was no sleight of hand that could have done that, and there was no distraction. I was sitting right there. She and I have discussed this many times. Even in the unlikely event that my ex was in on it, it would have been hard for me to not notice her slipping that card in her shoe. She doesn't have the poker face to fool me long-term like that anyway. I am inclined to believe that there was real magic. Story 15. We wanted a cat, but we're not looking too seriously. One night, while we were eating dinner, a cat showed up at our back door meowing. She walked right into the house as if she lived here. We posted her pictures everywhere to find her owners, but no one responded. She is our baby now. Story 16. Why does it feel like we have slipped into an alternate timeline in 2001 and 2016? My personal life is no exception. This is not the way it was supposed to happen. Gah. Story 17. My eyesight had always been poor since birth, and I always needed glasses. In 6th grade, suddenly, the eyesight in my right eye improved significantly, and now I no longer need glasses to see clearly. However, at the same time, my left eye completely lost vision, leaving me blind in that eye. It seems as if my left eye gave its vision to my right eye, but all the optometrists I have seen say that such a phenomenon should not be possible. I still have no idea what happened to me. Story 18. The contradiction that was my dad. Caring, hardworking man. A die-hard Republican. An older white man who supported former President Donald Trump. He talked a lot about getting rid of immigrants and why black people are horrible workers. At his job, all of his best friends were non-white people. Half of them were undocumented immigrants who worked in the oil fields. He was in charge of a construction job near an oil refinery for a few months. The contractors and owners of the property treated the workers poorly. My dad went out of his way to buy all the workers lunch and provide sports drinks and water to them every single day. When asked why he did that, he simply said, You don't treat people like dirt. He upset the owners one day by pointing out engineering flaws that could have killed the workers. He was fired from the job site as a result. At the end of the day, all the Mexican and black workers took the time to personally visit my dad and thank him for standing up for them. Yet he voted for policies that would negatively impact those people, despite the fact that more than half of his best friends were non-white immigrants. I also find it hypocritical because he married a Japanese woman, my mom, who is very different from my dad politically. I say everything in the past tense because he passed away. I want to say, and yes, this is because I am his son, that he truly had a good heart, although his political beliefs said otherwise. He was such a contradiction. Story 19. My dad had a very distinctive tie tack that he always wore. He retired at 58 and died at 65. One morning, about 10 years after he died, I found that tie tack in the middle of my dining table. I had no idea where it had been all those years or how it got into my house. Story 20. There is a legend that a banshee will either howl in the distance or knock on your door to warn you about a family member passing away soon. Depending on which legends you believe, either all Irish people have their own banshee, or only some do. However, all agree that if you leave Ireland, the banshee does not follow. The thing is, I am not from Ireland. The last of my family to be from Ireland emigrated in the 1890s in search of more potatoes or something. But I took a job in Northern Ireland about a decade ago. A few years into living there, I was staying over at my now husband's place. This is a typical kind of house with an outside door leading to a hall with two inside doors, each leading to an occupant's place. Both doors need separate keys to get in. While I was sleeping, I was woken by 3 loud knocks. Bang, 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 came from the inside door. I shot up from bed, startled. My eyes were fixed on the door as I listened closely to see if it might have been late-night partiers attempting to get into the wrong place. There was only silence. No one on the street. No one in the hall. After a few minutes of trying to hear anything, I tried to fall asleep again, even though something felt off. About 2 weeks later, I got a message from my mother. An uncle of hers had passed away, an uncle who would have shared that same Irish blood. Now, I am not superstitious, and it was just a coincidence. Quite the coincidence, though. Story 21. My dad and I were walking past this fairground, and I wanted to say hello to the clown. He performed a magic trick with a ball, and it disappeared. I have never found it. That was about 35 years ago. It is not behind my ears like he showed me the first time. Story 22. I went to work one morning, and about 7 minutes into the drive, I realized I forgot my phone. I made the first left and turned around to get it since I had time. I go to work early because parking is difficult. Somehow, at that turn, I ended up 20 minutes away from my house in an area I have never been in. 1 minute I was turning onto a street I take home every single day and know well, and the next I was 20 minutes north of where I had turned. As soon as I turned, I didn't recognize anything. I kept driving, hoping to see something familiar, and finally, I came to a stop sign about 10 minutes from my house. I was nowhere near where I should have been and should have already gotten home by then. To this day, it gives me a strange feeling. I even drove the route a few times afterward to see what could have happened, and I just can't figure it out. I passed the same house with a scarecrow hanging from a tree. It's still there. But that morning, when I got to the stop sign about 15 feet away to turn left, it all felt like the Twilight Zone. Story 23. I was living alone at the time. I received a call from my apartment complex that an older lady with short purple hair was asking about me in their office. They told me that due to privacy concerns, they did not confirm with her that I was living there, and the name she left was unfamiliar to me. By the description, I guessed it was my ex-wife. That night, when I got home and was cooking dinner, I could not find a pot holder. They were all missing. A few months later, while going through a tote under my bed, I found all my missing pot holders inside it. To this day, I do not know who that lady was, if she somehow got into my apartment, or why she would place my pot holders in a tote under my bed. Story 24. My friend's ex received an unsettling message that criticized him harshly, and I was blamed for it. There is no one my friend knows who had that many details about his life, so we were very confused. Story 25. A couple of months ago, I found Colombian pesos totaling 1,700 in my garage, worth about $4.50 American. I do not know where they came from. I have never been to Colombia, and I live alone. Story 26. I have a hat. It is a Scottish golfer type cap. I have had it for well over 20 years now, and it is my favorite hat in the world. About 10 years ago, I lost the hat. I asked my wife if she had seen it. She had not. I searched the house and the cars many times. The hat was gone. Months went by with no hat. That Christmas, I received 5 similar hats from friends and family because they knew how much I loved the hat. One morning, I was heading to work and got into my second car, parked behind my regular car. I noticed something on my headrest. It was my hat. I questioned everyone who could possibly have had access, and nobody admitted to anything. I genuinely believed them all. Story 27. My daughters were headed to their dad's for a week, and a special toy he bought them needed to go too. They loved this magic wand, but we couldn't find it. We had been looking for about a week as the trip got closer. They were young but old enough that if they found it, they would have been thrilled. The trip was the next day, and I still couldn't find the magic wand. I am really good at finding things and always know where stuff is. I can even locate things for other people at their houses. So not finding this was bizarre. We went out for dinner with my parents talking about the wand. I was headed home to put the kids to bed and planned to tear the house apart to find it. When we came in the back door, the wand was in the middle of the living room floor. It's just me and the kids in this house. There's no way we didn't see it. They were upset it couldn't be found, so it's not like they hid it and then pulled it out. Seriously, where did it come from? Story 28. I had a rice maker that disappeared. I was moving from one apartment to another and didn't have much, just a few boxes of stuff. I remember putting the rice cooker in a box with a few other kitchen items. I wrote rice cooker plus miscellaneous kitchen on it and closed the box. I didn't tape it but tucked the flaps underneath each other. I carried it to the car, drove to the new place, carried it upstairs, and noticed it seemed oddly light. I opened it and found no rice cooker, just the few kitchen items in a mostly empty box. I drove back to the first place. It was not there, not in the car, nowhere. The box was always in my possession, and no one helped me move. It wasn't a fancy rice maker worth stealing, and there was never a moment when someone could have taken it. It just vanished. Story 29. Where did my older brother go? He left in 1979 to 1980, and no one has seen him since. He was declared dead not many years later. Serving in Vietnam really affected him. Rest in peace, brother. Story 30. Lost a dear long-term friend to cancer in my early 30s. Spent a lot of time with him before he passed. About 6 months before he died, he said he had met someone, let's call him Fred, while at the hospital and started spending time with him. He used to talk about what he and Fred had been doing, and nothing seemed amiss. After he passed, his mother asked if I had ever met Fred and whether we should tell him about the funeral. Turned out nobody had met him, and only months later we realized there was a strong chance it was his mind playing tricks on him, as he had brain cancer. To this day, I still have not found the answer. Story 31. Minor deviation from the question, but there was a song stuck in my head on and off for over 10 years. Just a few days ago, it played on my Spotify recommended songs and I immediately recognized it. It was a music score from the show House of Cards, and not even one of the top 5 most popular ones. Bizarre how something so specific became a personal mystery that took over 10 years to resolve. Story 32. I think I've told this story on Reddit before, but I'll tell it again because it still bothers me to this day. When I was in high school, I borrowed my parents' car to go to my boyfriend's house. Where I live, there is a graduated driver's licensing program in place. When you're learning to drive, you have to have an L on your car. Once you take your road test, you get a new driver's license and must have an N on the back of your car for 2 years. I had my N at the time. When I came home that night, I parked the car in the driveway, took my N off the back of the car, locked the car, and went inside. Then I went to the kitchen and did what I always did when I brought the car back. I stuck my end to the fridge in the top left-hand corner. That was its spot, and hung my parents' keys on the key holder on the wall next to the fridge. Then I went to bed. I did this every time I brought the car home. N on the fridge, keys on the holder. The next morning, my mom came to my room to ask for the car keys. I told her they were on the key holder. She said they weren't there. A huge argument followed as we tore the house apart. No keys. They were nowhere to be found. Not in the kitchen, not in the driveway, not on the stairs, not in my room or in my bag. They were just gone. About a week later, my mom came to me and told me she found the keys. Where were they? In the pocket of a sweater she hadn't worn in years that was in the back of her closet. I would have had to walk into my parents' room, where they were both in bed, go into their closet, dig around for the sweater, and put the keys in the pocket. I most certainly did not do that. How did they get there? This question will likely haunt me for the rest of my life. Story 33. When my oldest was 6 months old, we found a bag of 60 wooden alphabet blocks at a thrift store for a very low price. Since my child was too young for them, we put the blocks in an ice cream container and placed it on our windowsill. A few months later, I went looking for them, but they were missing. I did not think much of it, assuming they would turn up eventually. A couple of months after that, we moved apartments just across the street. I kept thinking they would turn up during the move, and my husband thought so too. We packed up our entire apartment. Everything we owned went into boxes and was moved across the street. The blocks did not turn up. The two of us are certain that we never took them out of the house since we had no reason to. The window ledge where they were placed was on the second floor with no easy access from the outside. It is 16 years later, and it still bothers me that they just disappeared into thin air. Story 34. In 8th grade, I was desperate for romance. An unattractive young girl who just wanted to feel special. The boy I liked brought roses to school and gave single flowers to many other popular, pretty girls. We sat together at a table in science class. Of course, I got no flowers. Then, I had 12 pink roses delivered to my house with the message, "Someone thinks you're special." Signed, a friend. I obviously suspected a friend, but here's the puzzling part. I was very poor, so my phone was constantly turned off and on with a new number each time. My mom would get new accounts to start for us with new boyfriends. Long story short, the number on the card was my month-old number. Anyone who really knew me would know my new number. It was probably my mom, but probably not because of money. She still says it wasn't her, and I still don't know. Story 35. 3 weeks ago, I put 4 full trash bags on the curb the night before trash collection. When I came out an hour later with another bag, the 4 trash bags were gone. No sign. Not moved a block north or south. Not moved across the street. Just gone without a trace. I have no idea what could have happened. Story 36. Once when I was a kid, I heard another child on the playground tattle on his sister for saying the E word. I have been racking my brain ever since about what the E word could be. My only thought is maybe the child said the D word, for damn it or something. But he said it about 10 times and it sounded like E. Story 37. Is he still looking for cigarettes and diapers? I feel like he will never be able to come home, even if he wants to, because Mom moved us to a new town 6 or 7 months after he left. He simply does not know where we are. He does not know where to find me. I am 56. Story 38. Lost a tampon when I was a young teenager. I put it in and went to sleep. It was never found again. I have never sleepwalked and I hardly ever go to the toilet while sleeping. Almost 30 years ago, and I am still baffled. Of course, I have had gynecological checks over the years, and I would like to think any of them would have noticed a lone, grubby tampon stashed inside. Story 39. There was a full slice of pizza missing from the box once when I lived alone. I do not remember eating it. No crumbs, no plate, nothing. I still think about it years later. Story 40. Where the blue toothbrush that appeared in the middle of the kitchen floor came from was a mystery. It was just there one morning, and it wasn't mine. Story 41. Why can I tell when other people's children are going to be ill but not my own? I struggle to tell if mine are faking it for a day off school, But when I walk past my best friend's children, I know which one will be off school sick the next day. Once, on a vacation with friends, I got up during the night to tell my friend her son was sick a full 10 minutes before the child in question, who was sleeping at the opposite end of the house from me, woke up and vomited. How did I know? Story 42. In 1985, when I was 10 years old, I bought a Chinese throwing star from a very shady person at a flea market. I nailed a piece of wood with a spray-painted bullseye to a tree for target practice. At one point, I missed both the target and the tree. The star went into some foliage, and I have never found it. My parents lived in that house for another 20 years and occasionally searched the area where I knew it had landed, but still never found it. Story 43. I accidentally fell asleep with my newborn on the couch. I was in that light sleep state when you can still hear what is happening in the room. There was the sound of the cat jumping from his cat tree, cars in the street, and a wind chime next door. It was a perfect summer afternoon. All of a sudden, I heard, oh, she is asleep. With the baby? Looks like it. Oh well, that will not do. Wake up, dear. I jolted awake to an empty room and a sleeping baby on my chest. I did not recognize the voices. I have never experienced spooky things happen in the house before or after that day. I am absolutely baffled, but I do not think it was a dream. I generally do not remember dreams, but I still remember their voices clearly. Story 44. I would love to know what my grandfather actually did during World War II. Everyone always knew he was a veteran because he received his medical care through the Department of Veterans Affairs, but he never talked about the war beyond saying he was just a ski instructor. We know for a fact he was not just a ski instructor. He was already in the army before the war started and did not leave until after victory over Japan Day. He was involved in both the European and the Pacific theater. According to his old friend who knew him during the war and was also very tight-lipped about his experiences, my ski instructor grandfather spent more time on boats than his brother in the Navy and more time in airplanes than his brother in the Army Air Corps. When the USS Missouri was nearby in Astoria, my grandfather insisted on making the several-hour drive to visit because he promised the old ship he would. Upon arrival, he proceeded to talk about all the changes they had made to her. My uncle tried to request a copy of my grandfather's military records from the Army in the early 2000s, but the request went nowhere. Apparently, they were all destroyed in the 1973 fire at the National Personnel Records Center. Story 45. I heard footsteps outside at night at my family's cottage, which is in a really remote area. I was outside on the second floor back porch having a cigarette when I heard someone walking toward the house on the driveway. Then I heard footsteps between the house and garage, and finally underneath me in the backyard. The driveway and area between the buildings are covered in stones, making a distinct crunch when walked on. I thought it was a family member, so I waited for them to say something, but they remained silent. I went inside to see who it was, and everyone in my family was in bed. Could have been a bear, but the footsteps sounded human. Story 46. How can I have such accurate intuition? It does not make sense to me, but my intuition ranges from dreams, simple thoughts, and even situations that I experienced years ago in which I thought, in the future, this will happen again, and exactly the same thing happens. I have tried to ignore it because sometimes I think that these are intrusive thoughts that, if I give importance to them, will ruin what I am experiencing. However, I am always right. Story 47. How did such a beautiful, loving, and strong woman marry such a childish, goofy, nerdy fellow like me? A mystery no one can solve. Story 48. How did I manage to get extremely drunk for 4 years and not die or harm anyone else when I would drive home? Divine intervention. Story 49. On a cross-country road trip with my family, we stopped at a random hotel. Later that night, when we checked out the next morning, the front desk told my dad that an older-sounding woman had called asking for him by name. She was crying and said she heard he had skin cancer, but since she couldn't say what room he was in, they wouldn't transfer her. He looked shocked as he walked back to the car and started asking us if we had talked to any of our grandmothers or anyone. We said no and asked why she would call the hotel since we didn't know what hotel we were at. We called all of our grandmothers and no one knew anything. When he got home, he made an appointment and was clear, but we still don't know what that was about. Story 50. I was overseas in Afghanistan. My grandfather and I were close, and he was getting pretty old. I had long days and generally slept well. I lived near the flight line, so there were constantly aircraft taking off, and I could sleep through pretty much anything, including sirens and explosions. One night, I suddenly woke up early in the morning. There was no alarm, no noise, nothing. I just snapped wide awake. I couldn't figure out why. That never happens to me. I'm not a morning person and don't just snap awake for no reason. I tried to go back to sleep because I had another long day ahead. An hour or two later, my alarm went off, and around that time my wife called to tell me my grandfather had passed away. Story 51. I was at a friend's house playing video games. I was on the floor and he was sitting on his bed. We were both out of arm's reach from his window. He had aluminum blinds that pulled up with a string. We were in the middle of gaming when suddenly, the aluminum blinds shot open. To this day, he and I have no idea how that happened. I still think about it sometimes, and I have yet to come up with a logical explanation. Story 52. I once lost an adult toy that I never took out of my bedroom. I lived alone, and the only other person who came to my house was my boyfriend, who now lives with me. He claimed to have no idea. In the past year, we have rearranged every room in the house, and that item is just gone. Story 53. I lived in the Midwest in 2022, and one winter night I stayed over at a friend's place. The next morning, around 7:30, we were walking to his car. It had snowed overnight, and I was making fresh footprints. Suddenly, as I was about halfway to the car, I noticed my exact footprints right in front of us. There were about 6 of them on the ground, leading up to the passenger door. They were my exact size and shoe type. It seemed as if someone had been walking to my friend's car, but the prints appeared out of nowhere. I pointed it out to him, and we both kind of played it off. I even joked, maybe someone else is wearing Vans in the neighborhood. Later, I texted him, and we both agreed it was really strange. I definitely think the universe glitched. The prints alone didn't make sense because of where they started. My exact fresh footprints were especially weird. Story 54. One day when I was in high school, I was sitting alone in my room folding my laundry after I got home from school. I randomly had a thought that popped into my head. I wonder how my brother Dan's wife Jessica is doing? My brother Dan and I had been raised separately since he was my half-brother. At that point, I had only ever been around him 3 times in my life. We didn't really keep up, but 3 years prior, I had met his new wife Jessica at their wedding. It was only for a few hours. Well, 20 minutes later, my mom came up to my room and told me that Dan had just called her to let our family know that Jessica had just passed away from cancer that morning. I did not know she had cancer. My mom didn't know, and my 2 other sisters didn't know either. I hadn't really ever thought about Jessica specifically that I recall, and my brother Dan never really visited us or called me since we were so far apart in age and were never raised together. I still remember and question that day. Why did I have that thought at that moment? Story 55. Some people just have that sixth sense. My mother always knew exactly where I was, even when I thought I was being sneaky. The alarm phenomenon is remarkable. Our brains are essentially internal timekeepers with a unique sense of humor. Story 56. If my father really did cheat on my mother when she was pregnant with me, the math on both sides is a little confusing, and I have never been able to figure it out one way or another. Story 57. In my notes app on my phone, under one of my work notes, there is a phrase that I have never read before in my life and have no clue how it got there. I have kept it because it is really profound, and I read it every now and then. Here is the phrase, "Hone with God in a life that never ends." I have never seen this, said it, or thought it in my entire life, and I am 62 years old. Story 58. One time I was waking up from anesthesia for surgery, and I was told I had already woken up before that and had been in such pain that they sedated me again. I had absolutely no memory of waking up before then. As far as my memory told me, I had been deeply unconscious from the moment I fell asleep before the surgery to the moment I clearly remembered waking up. I have been through many similar recoveries from anesthesia and surgery, which left soreness and pain afterwards for a short time, but none of the memories of those other occurrences are even slightly blurry. So why do I not remember a single thing about apparently waking up in great pain for what must have been at least a minute, according to what I was told, and then being sedated again? Story 59. I had a very old college hoodie. It was super comfortable, missing half a sleeve, with the elbow missing on the other sleeve, and the pocket was also gone. It was really worn in, and it went missing 10 years ago. I looked everywhere for years, went through the garbage, and searched our giveaway pile. My boyfriend insists he didn't throw it out, and I definitely wouldn't have thrown it out. It's my greatest personal mystery. Where is my favorite sweater? Did somebody take it? Did my boyfriend throw it out? Will I somehow find it at some point? Story 60. When I was about 10, I woke up in the middle of the night, and my pillow was gone. I had it when I went to sleep, and I have always been a very light sleeper. It was not down the wall or under the bed. I searched the room, my sister's room, and the rest of the house the next day. It never showed up again. Story 61. How I was conceived. I was adopted at birth. According to my parents, my birth mother wants nothing to do with me and will apparently turn and leave if she sees me in public. They say she is ashamed of having to give me up, but I am not sure if that is the real reason. It does not help that they know nothing about my birth father. Part of me wonders if I was a child from an assault, since my mother had me in her late teens, but they will not tell me anything about my birth family, so I cannot find them to confirm. I have heard I may have younger siblings, and I would love to find out if I do, as I have always wanted little siblings. I would do one of those ancestry kits, but I cannot afford them. I am sure my parents would be upset if I tried to get one anyway, so I would not be able to have a kit sent to the house. My mind goes into overdrive about it sometimes, and lately it has been on my mind a lot. Story 62. Why did one of my best friends, whom I had known for about 12 to 13 years, just stop talking to me entirely? I am not even upset that he stopped. I am annoyed that I have no closure. It is deeply infuriating, and I have no clue where he went, or else I would ask what happened. Story 63. At our military base, while working on aircraft, we dealt with a lot of hazardous materials. We had an assortment of sealants, lubricants, oils, anti-seize compounds, and various chemicals containing harmful substances. Some of these came in 55-gallon drums and were definitely very unhealthy. When a 55-gallon drum was empty, the procedure was to triple rinse the barrel, clean it out, and store it until pickup for disposal. For a few years, I worked in the quality assurance section. Our job was to enforce compliance with standards and regulations. During research one day, we found out that triple rinsing those barrels was not required. The chemicals inside were harmful but did not require that level of cleaning. We informed the personnel that the process was no longer necessary. One supervisor asked, "What do we do with the barrels we already cleaned? What did you do with them before?" Kevin came around and collected them. Who is Kevin? The barrel guy. He calls occasionally, asks if we have barrels to collect, and picks them up with his truck. Is he a contractor on the base? We do not think so. Who does he work for? We do not know. You have no idea who he is or who he works for. Then why are you letting him collect your old barrels? We thought that was his job. This caused concern. After searching for whoever collected barrels, nobody knew who Kevin was, who he worked for, or what he was doing with the barrels. There were no records of him on the base. No one in our work centers paid him, and no one knew his phone number. He called us, and no one questioned it. We never found out who Kevin was. Supervisors were told to alert us if he called back, but he never did. He disappeared, along with the many barrels he collected. Story 64. I was little, 7 or 8 years old, playing with Play-Doh in the backyard on a clear day, with not a cloud in sight. My mother was mowing the lawn when I heard a garbled, static voice address me by name and tell me to go inside. It was not my mother, and I was not in her way. I was on the patio. But I listened, and no sooner had I closed the sliding door than a bolt of lightning struck the middle of the yard about 5 feet from my mother. It left a divot. I saw it, she saw it, but she was completely uninjured. Story 65. When I was 17, I came home from school and the house was empty. I started doing one of my chores, the dishes. I took care of all the dishes, loaded them in the dishwasher, and went upstairs. Then I heard a ruckus, so I went downstairs. All the cups I had taken care of were knocked down on the kitchen floor. Story 66. Bought a brand new pair of shoes one summer. Stepped in dog feces later that night and left them on the doorstep. The shoe with the dog feces was missing the next morning. Never found it around 2009. Story 67. I went to a music festival in Washington a couple of years ago and stopped at a dispensary in Oregon on the way there. I bought a small glass pipe that diverged in the middle and created an O shape between the mouthpiece and bowl, purposely because it looked more like a pendant than paraphernalia. A friend gave me a chain, and I securely attached it to the piece and wore it like a necklace all weekend. The only way it would have come off the chain was if I purposely removed it or if the glass broke. I went to bed the final night wearing the necklace, with it tucked under the shirt and hoodie I was wearing to sleep. When I went to the bathroom the following morning, it was gone. The chain was still on my neck, but the piece was nowhere to be found. I did not take it off, and there is no way it broke without me noticing, because I would have felt glass shards in my shirt. I will never know what happened to my little pipe. Story 68. My best friend and I had the same dream one night. It was a classic, wacky, unpredictable dream. We went down a waterslide and ended up fighting an ogre on a spaceship. We were in it together, so I did things and saw him doing things as the dream progressed. The next day, I started to tell him he had been in my dream, and he excitedly said that I had been in his dream. We compared stories and took turns saying what happened next to make sure it was real. Everything he said he did in his dream was what he did in my dream. Everything he saw me do was what I did. I have never had anything like that happen again. It was such a vivid dream, and his presence was so strong. He said it was the same for him. I have no idea what happened or how, but I believe our minds connected somehow as we slept. Story 69. Where is my Stu Leonard's gift card with about $200 left on it? I am sure I will find it during my upcoming move, but I could really go for some free steak right now. Story 70. A couple of months ago, I had the song The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics in my head. That group had two lead singers, Paul Young and Paul Carrick. I was wondering which Paul sang that song. That reminded me of another song from the 1980s I had heard about a year and a half ago that I knew Paul Carrick did solo. This song is rarely on the Sirius XM 1980s station. I couldn't remember the name, melody, or lyrics of the song, but I knew it existed. I got in my car and started driving to the post office with the 1980s station on. A couple of minutes into my trip, the song by Paul Carrick that I was trying to remember came on the radio. It was eerie. The song is called Don't Shed a Tear. I've had similar experiences, but this was by far the strangest. Story 71. Why is it that any time I have a nightmare, it always takes place in my grandmother's house? I always felt safe in her house when I was growing up, so why is that the setting for monsters and things trying to harm me? Story 72. I set my clothes out. I prepare my coffee maker and lunch. I wrap my hair so that it will not be too much to do while trying to get ready for work the next morning. And yet, I lie in bed until I am late. Story 73. When I was 19, I reconnected with an ex. She was in town visiting someone and came into my workplace, and old feelings resurfaced. We spent the next 4 days together. She told me she loved me and wanted me to come back home with her. I said I needed to tell my family what was going on because my parents were out of the country at the time. She agreed. We kissed each other goodbye, and I never saw or heard from her again. Story 74. My parents have their native dialect from their province. They use it to talk to each other. I can understand it perfectly and translate what they say to other people. However, I am not able to speak it. Feels like my mind goes blank. Why? Is that normal? My second language is English. I am able to understand and speak it. But with my parents' dialect, I can only understand it. If I can understand it, I should be able to speak it. Why? It is a big mystery. I wonder if there are other people like that. Story 75. I got blackout drunk at a college party and woke up back at my apartment. I don't know how I got home. The only clues were a pair of girl flip-flops, not mine or any of my roommates, and a fake flower. Story 76. Why did my lamp turn on when I was sure I did not do it? It was the scariest moment of my life. I felt watched and left the house to wait outside for my parents to come home. Story 77. Finally, a question I have always had an answer to but have never been asked. One morning, I walked into our kitchen and found a massive puddle on the countertop facing the window. There did not seem to be any leaks from the window, and the water was not even touching the window. It had not rained, and no glasses had fallen over either. My husband had no idea what had caused it. This happened years ago, and I still think about it to this day. Story 78. Someone drew a penis in the small notebook I have on the front of my purse. Who did it? No one will confess. Story 79. One day I was in a dollar store looking at clear glass cases when something popped into my head and told me that Jane was pregnant. Jane is my sister. I went home and texted her to ask if she was pregnant. And she was but hadn't told anyone yet. It was genuinely unexplainable. Story 80. On the 7th anniversary of my boyfriend's and my relationship, which also happened to be Valentine's Day, we received a thick envelope in the mail addressed to both of us by name and address, as we lived together. It contained a paper garland of red hearts, very appropriate. There was no note or anything else. We asked all of our friends and family members, but nobody knew anything about it. A few years later, after I had moved to a new address, I received a package on our anniversary. It contained a helium balloon with something about lovebirds on it and a printed card that congratulated us lovebirds on our anniversary. There was no name or any hint about who sent it. Again, none of our friends or family knew anything about it. We still do not know who sent them. Story 81. My dad was really good at card tricks and sleight of hand. When I got older, he showed me how he did them. When I was around 4, I had no idea. Because we were poor with few things to entertain me, and it was the early 1990s, I spent a lot of time trying to teach myself card tricks to figure out the magic. I tried to make my card disappear while my dad was napping. My dad could do this and make it reappear several cards down. I did the trick. I knocked on the cards. I looked for my card, the 9 of clubs, and it was gone. I looked everywhere in the house. It wasn't under the couch, stuck to me, stuck to another card, or in the deck where I had put it. My dad helped me look when he woke up. We just never found it. Story 82. I have talked about this before, but I will retell the story now. I am a kindergarten teacher in Japan. I am also a very tall white man who wears size 31 centimeter shoes. Years ago, as the children were getting ready to go home, I had to go to the restroom. Being in Japan, you take your shoes off and put on bathroom slippers when using the restroom. So, I took my shoes off in front of the bathroom, put on the slippers, and went to the restroom. I was there for maybe a minute or two, and when I came out, my shoes were gone. I looked around but could not find them. I told the other teachers, and soon everyone who was free was looking for them. Nobody could find them. They were just gone. The next day was an open class day where parents come in to watch and observe their children. When they come in, they take off their outdoor shoes and put them on top of the children's shoe lockers in front of the rooms. If you have never been to a school in Japan, there is a lot of shoe changing. The parents came in, watched their children, and then left and went home. Shortly after, one of the teachers was walking by another classroom and saw my shoes that had gone missing the other day just sitting on top of the shoe locker. There was no damage. The shoes were just there. The mystery is what happened to the shoes and where they went. We have all speculated as to what happened. The most popular theory is that a child grabbed them and took them home. However, as I said, they are size 31 centimeter shoes, about a third of the size of the children. How could a child walk out of the school without anyone noticing or seeing them carrying these large shoes? If they were on the school bus, a teacher rides with the children and would have seen them. If they were picked up, the parent would have seen. The shoes are big enough that they could not just slip into a bag either. Also, if they did get the shoes home and the parent brought them in the next day, why did the parents not apologize or say anything? Parents send notes of apology when returning extra clothes the children change into if they have wet themselves. None of it makes sense. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.